we try to build a community and to widen the discussion around the issues of not just privacy. In our case, it's broader than that. It's privacy, it's AI, autonomous weapons, income inequality that we see in the tech sector, the environmental impact of the tech companies and how some of them destroy the environment. For a small organization, we try to make a lot of noise. We'll go to a protest, bring our big signs and hang out and, with the EFA folks if we can, against Apple or any company. And we don't have an issue in terms of being outspoken. What kind of project are you willing to walk away from, Mr. Company X? Who are you going to say no to? What was the last deal or contract you said no to that you thought was unethical? Because just because you're incorporated doesn't mean I need to do business with you. Just because you're building and working on the next technology for weapon system doesn't mean I need to do business with you. So it's up to you to choose who you want to work for. So make a point of it to ask upfront, what these companies represent by who they work for and what kind of projects they're willing to say no to. And that's how I evaluate tech companies, is based on them telling me no.
But that idea of asking what projects have you walked away from is brilliant. I'm going to start doing that, because if someone doesn't have the right answer, I really do want to work for an ethically good company.
We are dealing with brute force machine learning and buying and selling stocks and in our Bitcoin tradings of the world. And we have underlying capitalism that doesn't care about the people. So it's capitalism combined with machine learning and producing greed learning. And what I see is, unfortunately, a lot of people can't participate in this system that we have created in the stock market, in the Bitcoin market. If you think about the poor, the people that don't have enough money to survive, they're not going to be able to buy shares, they're not going to be able to make investments, and they're kind of excluded from the opportunities that the folks with the algorithms have. And we need a more equitable society. These kinds of people scare me because they're so in it for their own greed. They can't spend the money they have gained in their entire lifetime, and yet they need more. And they could do so much good with it. Unfortunately, they choose not to. So, what do we do as activists? What is it that is going to bring us together and say we need to build a community to make sure our voices is heard, to make sure the voices of the poor is heard, make sure the voices of the people that don't have it, the people that get discriminated against is heard. But you know what? It's going to take us a whole collective to make sure that these news pieces stay in the headlines. We have a tendency to forget in this country. A war happened. 2 weeks later, we forget about it. I hope we don't. I hope we have a more longer memory.
That actually, gets to an interesting question I would have in general, which is how do, we people who really care about these issues, we tend to stay engaged on them and follow them even when the news cycle leaves them. But how do we keep the sustained pressure up when the news cycle starts moving?
At the end of the day, I just think that we need to have regulations. That the only thing that they're afraid of is two things: how it impacts their investors and how it impacts their PR. And if we can make an impact on those two, plus regulations, from activist perspective, reach out to investors, know their business practices, tell them not to invest in these companies unless they change X, Y, and Z. And from a PR perspective, go after them when they launch a new product, when they have a new product offering. Let's go to Las Vegas for reInvent, but let's be outside passing out flyers and connecting with food.
You know, if I didn't know any better, I would almost think this might have something to do with why the big tech companies are so desperate to get their employees back in the office. Because if they're no longer in that enclosed campus environment, well, suddenly they're not cut off from the real world anymore now, are they? Just a thought. We got a question here from Carl.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of talk about, surveillance, on a macro level, especially by the government and police, but I'm thinking more like on a micro level. Because recently I've been like really close at getting some jobs. They really liked my resume on Indeed or LinkedIn. And then all of a sudden, I'm not a fit. So I'm thinking what's happening is I look good initially, but then once I make it, to a certain point, they say, well, let me Google this guy. He's hanging out with Kevin and blah, 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 blah.
I would hope I'm not terrible for one's employment. But if you look at after World War II, at the founding of the UN, if you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, what do you know what one of those rights is? It's the right to privacy. Like, it is a universal human right, which most people, and especially whoever's running these tech companies, seem to forget about a lot. I mean, there's been a lot of studies on it. Humans have a psychological need for privacy. We don't function very well if we feel we're being watched all the time. And that's not even getting into all the other harms, but it's just psychologically draining for human beings. A lot of the creep of the surveillance state comes from things like local police departments abusing digital search warrants, which are way more invasive than traditional old-fashioned search warrants. So, and even more than that, the sort of hacker community has a lot of overlap with political cynicism and anarchy of various stripes politically. And, I'm pretty far left with anarchist leanings myself, but I ruthlessly advise people to get involved in politics, to vote, maybe even run for office if they're a masochist for punishment. But I encourage people, even though I don't have much faith in the existing system, I encourage people to get involved anyway. And frankly, a lot of it comes down to my insights as like a programmer, where I'm like, there's a lot of similarities between a systems of laws and government and a computer system. And the truth is, just like a computer system can be hacked, systems of laws and governance can be hacked. And no matter how well you design a system of law and governance, if you don't stay an active stakeholder in it, someone will eventually hack that system and break it. So you can talk about, oh, well, this system's broken. I'm going to start my insert new utopian system. And I'm like, but I promise you, if you don't stay constantly engaged with that system, somebody will hack your new system and ruin it.
Thinking that in this, I guess, activism industry, a lot of the people who are involved of it seem to be like people who know about law and people who know about tech. And for the common layperson, I don't know much about technology and I don't know much about law. It's very complicated speech, if that you could say. And there's a lot of technical terms, and you got to convey it to people what's going on and simplify the issue, so that the people who are not talking about tech, the people who are not talking about law, because I don't know about you, but law is kind of boring for a lot of people. And so is technical terms that I don't know much about. And yes, we've got to get into it and educate ourselves, but we got to break it down and simplify these very complex issues so people can get on board and put it, I guess, storytell it. Because when we don't know about something, we tell stories.